Hi, this is Terry Healy bringing you some extraordinary transformation. Today I am doing a pre-recording a show and also doing a video version that we can share later. I want to thank everyone who's tuning in. You are listening to WVLP at 103.1 FM, also live streaming at WVLP.org. Today's show is brought to you by Ryan Eberhardt from Diamond Residential Mortgage. Not all mortgage companies are the same. Not all loan professionals are the same. Ryan has an exceptional level of commitment to his clients, and he truly wants to do the right thing for someone, for their family, for their pocketbook. Ryan's office is conveniently located on Route 30 in Valparaiso, Indiana, and his direct phone number is area code 219-707-8429. Thank you, Ryan, for supporting community radio. Today, I have a very interesting guest. This is one, sometimes you get lucky and a guest will show up out of the ethers, not anything that you were looking for, not on the radar, and that was what happened with me. I am speaking with a gentleman named Talmadge Travis.
Talmadge Travis.
Yeah, and I happened upon him at a family party last night. It's one of those things where you just kind of meet somebody and you think, I want to know what's going on from between the two ears. I want to know what's happening with this person. And we got the opportunity to talk and exchange some information. And so here we are, recording radio. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. So we talked about a lot of things last night, and it's kind of but the knowing is that we could probably spend a lifetime talking and probably still have things to say.
I agree.
And things to explore. And, every so often you happen upon somebody and you're thinking, boy, that's going to be exciting, right? There's going to be some cool things coming out of that.
Absolutely.
So that was my thought, and I think it was probably a shared thought.
Yes.
We'll see what rolls from that. But we had some interesting conversation last night. We were talking a little bit about past history and how it impacts our lives today.
Absolutely.
What we carry through, and I was hoping that you would be open to kind of sharing what we were talking about last night.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah. So the background to my story, born in Mound Bayou, Mississippi. Moved to California, I'm assuming for better opportunity.
Right.
And we were doing fine in California. I had great childhood. Everything was going well. And then Rodney King happened. So when the Rodney King incident happened, there were military guards on corners and things like that. So my mother wanted us to get out of California, and I guess it was the pursuit of a safer life. So she shipped us to Chicago.
Wow.
Right, little did we know.
Well, she probably heard great things about Chicago.
Right. Yeah. And my father was here, so she had
Nice.
we had a parental figure here. She stayed back in California, still working on her music career. So
Oh, wow.
she's a blues singer. So by the name of Nellie Tiger Travis. So
Oh, goodness. So will we find her if we Google?
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Let's do that.
So we get to Chicago, and everything was going well, but there were some issues with some of the neighborhood kids. They were already used to the Chicago life, and we weren't. My brother and I, we were not. We were not prepared for it at all. So there was just small issues that would keep coming up. But then this one day, we were outside, summertime, Chicago, beautiful, everything was going well, get into a fight.
Oh, okay.
Right. So I get into a fight, and coming out of that fight, I would say I was the victor. And there were some of the local gangs out there, and they witnessed the fight. So at that point, that's when they approached me, and they basically said, "Hey, you're going to be in this gang." I won't name the faction, but that's pretty much what happened. So
Do you mind if I just jump in on
absolutely.
you? So, okay, so they came to you and said, you will be part of this?
Yes.
Not
Yes.
will you? Are you interested?
Yeah,
We'll talk about
it wasn't a matter of a question.
And why did they select you? Why did they seek you out and do that?
If I had to guess, I would say because I was able to fight.
Okay.
I will say that I wasn't put to a test or anything other than initiation, but that's pretty much the extent of that. So it's not like they had me as an enforcer or anything like that, you know.
So did the initiation come after you?
Yeah.
I'm guessing you took their guidance and joined the gang.
Right.
You said this is where it got to go.
Right.
Did you feel that you had a choice on any of that?
Not really. I do know my older brother was against it. He's like, no, because he was there when it all happened. So, but for me, it was just a part of the culture. It was a part of life. Like most of the friends that I made up until that point were involved in gangs or some sort of affiliation with it, be it family members or something like that. So, and there was a lot of people who would claim the gangs because that's the neighborhood they grew up in. So even though they never really officially was initiated in or anything like that, they would still claim that gang because that's the area that they're from. It's pretty typical. So, so it was more so this is the path that it was leading to anyway.
So did you have any experience with any of that when you were in California, or is that just kind of the shock in Chicago?
We experienced a little bit. We had friends in California whose uncles were seemingly calling shots out there. So we experienced gang life out in California as well. We just weren't close enough to it. In my opinion, we weren't close enough to it to where it just really had a impact on us.
You were just kind of like out there, you knew it was
we
out
were
there
just
kind of thing.
kids playing.
What, and you just have to bear with me because I don't speak that language. You know, this is a foreign world to me, and probably to a lot of people that are listening.
Right.
So when one of the things that you'd said is calling shots, what exactly is that?
So calling shots it's pretty much the leader of a section or area. So they pretty much are the go-to guys for something to happen in the neighborhood. So whether it's allowing people to sell drugs in that area or calling shots to set up fights or different things like that. So it's pretty much just like a leader.
Gotcha.
So it's a leader of the gang. So.
And is there usually only one person that does that, or?
There are, and I believe it's the same for all, but I can't speak for all. But there are multiple levels of leadership.
Okay.
From the person who's responsible for violations, or which is, it's like the gang's way of correcting whatever the behavior or issues are that's going on. So if you do something to another gang member, then the person who's in charge of violations can sanction you to get beat up or something like that.
Is this internally? So
Yes,
okay.
it's internal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's it's a very unique system. From the outside, most people look at gangs as this barbaric, just all negative, all bad. But experiencing it, I think it's a different mindset for those involved. There's policing system, so to speak, to keep you guys in line. One of the things that attracted me growing up was they seemingly cared about the community. So we would have to clean up the vacant lots or help the elderly people with their groceries and things like that. These are all things that, would come down from the top to say, hey, this is what we do in our neighborhood.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? So,
Gotcha.
so it was very interesting.
And I'm just I apologize.
Absolutely.
I'm just going to interject a little bit, but so when they're what we consider to be vandalizing, so when a gang goes out and they put their symbols on or their art or whatever to identify their territory,
Absolutely.
Right? Is that then? Do they see that as being disrespectful of
the neighborhood? No.
No. They just see that as this is what we do to
This
define
is
our.
this is
define our
where
area.
we are. This is our neighborhood. And it's pretty much marking territory.
Okay,
So-
got it. Well, I know gangs are like hundreds and hundreds of years
Oh,
old,
yeah,
right?
absolutely,
And I always think of things like gangs that started not in the United States, but before
absolutely.
we were even going down. So somebody it's almost like politics that there has to be a system and a check and
Yes,
a balance and all of that.
yes.
So, and then here's my understanding,
Hmm.
which again is limited and probably off the mark. But I always thought of gangs as a place to provide community for kids that didn't have a sense of community.
Yes,
So maybe there weren't
family.
adults in the
Absolutely,
in the household or things like that.
absolutely.
And so the gangs would step in and pick up the slack
Right. And it was a way
provide.
to help us protect our people. So the government wasn't doing it in a lot of cases, or it was protection from governments, from police, things like that. So, you know,
Okay, so just getting my head wrapped around that. So the gang would the gang have more? I'm going to say power than the local law enforcement or government systems.
in some cases,
Okay.
there were different connections made with people in uniform or government officials, things like that, that allowed the gangs to police themselves or police the neighborhood, the area, just as long as it didn't get too radical in some cases.
Okay.
But that's above my level of understanding for the most part. Those are not things that I was involved in, you know. But you do see a lot of connections. You see some of the communications that take place between those that you look up to and respect in the neighborhood and the police or different officials, aldermen, things like that. So you see or hear about the communication, you know, even at a low level. So
Sure.
yeah, but it was fairly common.
And would you say that that was to keep everything in order, to
Yeah.
keep things working
Absolutely.
for both
For
sides?
both parties.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I got it. I got it. Okay, so here you are. Can I ask how old you were when this all was happening?
This was 92, 93-ish. So
You were
I
12 years
was,
old.
yeah, 12.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness! Wow.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. For anybody listening, think of when you were 12, or if you've got a 12-year-old running around.
Right.
That's breathtaking. To think of a 12-year-old,
Yeah.
kind of being introduced to that, brought into that world,
Absolutely.
chosen for that. So did your dad know?
No,
No.
he
Got
did
it.
not know. He was against it. He did want us to stick up for ourselves. So
Sure.
the fighting he knew about, and
Right.
it was more so, don't go out and get punked. Like, don't let nobody disrespect you. You know, that type of mentality. So we that part he knew about, but he did not want us in the gang. He was very adamant and vocal about that. So
And can I ask what was his experience that he didn't want you involved?
he didn't have any affiliation with gangs or anything like that. He just came up and he worked his way to where he was. Like he's, you know, just like anybody else. So also from Mississippi, he came here. I'm not sure when he came here, but I do know he came to Chicago and he's been working, you know. So
Did he grow up in Chicago then, or did he grow up in Mississippi and
no,
then
he
transplant?
he grew up in Mississippi. I know for certain that he was in Mississippi into his early 20s. I'm
Got
not
it.
sure at what point after that he left. He, I believe, is about 4 years older, so he might have been 25 or so
Okay.
when we were born, my brother and I. So I know for sure he was in Mississippi until then.
Well, that kind of
So
explains a few things. So I'm going to guess that there wasn't a lot of gang activity where he grew up in Mississippi.
I suspect not.
Yeah.
Growing up in Mississippi, the short amount of time I did, I didn't experience any
Yeah.
gang stuff, but I was also young, so maybe there were things happening that I was unaware of,
There's
you know.
probably always things happening.
Absolutely.
I'm thinking there's probably not a whole lot of gang activity in Indiana, but there probably is.
Right.
It's probably just not on my radar.
Right.
So I want to take a moment and let everyone know you're listening to WVLP at 103.1 FM. We're also live streaming at WVLP.org. Thank you for everyone listening and anyone just tuning in. I've got a very interesting guest today, Mr. Talmadge Travis, and he's actually very open and very forthcoming, and we're having an exploratory conversation about gangs.
Yeah.
Because he's got some history with that, and it's illuminating.
Thank you.
For me. So, and what I hope to do in all things is kind of shed a different light, see a different perspective, introduce anyone who happens to be tuning in to just a different vantage point. Whether or not you take that on or you want to claim that as a truth, that's your choice, your journey, not my thing.
Right.
But just to provide it as a way of looking at things.
Absolutely.
We had a good conversation about this last night, and I think what was absolutely shocking to me was that you were chosen to be a part of a gang, and it wasn't anything that you sat down or looked at it and said, I want to be a part of that.
Right.
You weren't seeking anything.
Right.
You weren't missing anything. I'm probably your mother in California without question at age 12.
Yeah.
But I don't think that you had like huge vacancies you were trying to fill or any of that. So here you were, the victor of a fight, of a street fight,
Right.
and they said, like, we want that kid on our team,
Right.
And so they said, this is what you're going to do. Were you afraid?
More so nervous, as opposed to afraid. I hadn't been exposed to the more violent side of gangs. So you hear about the shootouts, but for me, that was so distant in my thoughts. That was so distant that wasn't even a factor when deciding to go ahead and do it. It wasn't even a factor. It was more so family, most of my friends, everything that was in my environment made me feel like that it was okay. Outside of my father's point of view.
Yeah.
But other than that, I remember sitting in the house playing with my cousins, and one of the things that we played was drug dealer. So, so we're balling up little pieces of paper, pretending that they're rocks,
Right.
so we could sell. So like that was just us playing. It was so much of a norm. We saw it so often that from our perspective, that was okay. We didn't see the side of a crackhead and what their family might have been dealing with or anything like that. We didn't look at it from that point of view. We looked at it from this is Chicago, this is what we do point of view.
Well,
So
that was your world?
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, I got that. So you've got a father who, and just my guess is, when we're growing up and we always look at our parents and think, they just don't know.
Right.
They don't know anything.
Right.
How did they get that far in life? And how are they able to drive a car? We don't know, right? So I'm going to guess that was probably your mentality. Is that your dad was old school? He didn't understand. He didn't know the real world.
Yeah.
But I got that you didn't want to explain it to him because you were probably concerned if he knew that he would find a way to make that stop. For you, kind of thing.
It's not something you just really brought to your parents to say, "Oh, this is what I did today."
Right.
You know what I mean?
So, oh, by the way.
Right.
Yeah.
So you didn't do any of that. If I had to guess, I think there might have been some inclination that some changes happened, because you start wearing different colors. And back then we were wearing windbreakers, so you have your one pant leg up or something like that. There was different indications that, a piercing in the ear or something like that. There were different changes that I know for sure I made that he probably could have picked up on. So I don't know if it was a matter of choosing not to believe it, didn't want to ask to get the truth, or I don't know what it was, but Yeah, that was the last thing on my mind was going to tell him.
Sure.
But there were changes in my behavior that I'm sure he could have picked up on. So
There's like that selective listening that we have with our
yeah,
kids. I don't know if you have it with yours, but I've got it with mine.
absolutely.
There's just stuff that's just not happening. But if
Right,
something's good, I'm on it,
right,
right? And
absolutely.
it gets me through the day and gets me
Yep.
through sleeping at night. And I wonder too. I mean, here you are, a 12-year-old guy that
Mm-hmm.
that how much of that he might have just written off to you were in puberty,
Right.
you're an adolescent, you're
Quite
changing,
possibly.
you're changing, your body's changing, everything.
Right.
You're growing into the man that you're going to be.
Quite possibly.
So here we've got a brother who is against it, doesn't tell dad,
Right,
and nobody's telling mom.
right.
Okay, so but did you have other family around you that knew that you were doing it?
There were other family members. Eventually, my brother also became affiliated as well.
Really?
Yeah,
Same gang?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So he became affiliated as well, and I think it was more so the same reasoning. I never really sat down and asked him, but I believe
Yeah.
it's the same reasoning where these are the people you're around. Most of the neighborhoods that we were in had the same gang affiliation. So we would stay with my father or my aunties, and they're in the same area as the gang I joined. And then we made some new friends because of my stepmother and the area that she would go with her friends. Those are the friends we made, and they were in the same gang. So it was very easy moving throughout the city because most of the places that we went had the same gang. So again, it's what's around you.
Well, it almost like reinforces it for you.
Yeah.
The,
And you look at how large your family becomes. It opens up the scope from, okay, yeah, we're in this neighborhood. And yeah, we know these guys, but we made some new friends over there. Oh, and by the way, they're in the same faction. So it just feels like a larger family. You know what I mean?
I get that. I get that. It almost feels like figuring out that you've got long distant relatives.
Right, right.
And all of a sudden your family my heart gets warm.
Yeah.
When you say that, I'm like, wow, there's more of us,
Right.
Kind of expand your scope. And
Absolutely.
I think that probably all plays upon itself, so it's
Yeah.
like the bigger that all that gets and the more that you feel part of okay, larger
Yeah.
than yourself, which I think we're all kind of designed to want to do.
Right.
I don't think we're supposed to be lone wolves out there, but okay, so here we are, 12-year-old boy. I'm gonna say targeted. Can I just say that?
I wouldn't necessarily
Can we say
say
chosen?
targeted. I would say
Okay,
chosen.
let's say chosen.
Yeah.
Chosen by this gang, and you decide you're going to go for it. A little nervous about it,
Right.
and off you roll.
Yeah.
So the next step is that the initiation that
Yeah.
starts happening.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
It's so initiations differ from different factions. Mine was pretty much, you're in the alley, and you got a few guys that you're fighting. So a certain amount of time, and then it's over. Then it's all love. So
Okay, so they stage that, they
Yeah.
orchestrate this,
yeah.
and are they they can't be members of your gang that
Yes.
you're fighting? They
Yes.
are.
Yes.
And what is the purpose of this? Is this just to show
Um,
strength or
strength, your heart, and
heart?
yeah, are you willing to fight for and with your brothers? So yeah, it's odd.
If you could be in my head, you'd be like ding ding
Right.
ding. You'd see all this stuff
Yeah,
like starting to light
I
up.
know it sounds odd, but it is. It's a matter of testing your heart. Are you willing to fight with us?
Okay. Okay. So then, whether or not you prevail or you don't, does that matter? Or is it still
No,
the same outcome?
no, it's still the same
Okay,
outcome.
so it's just the
in my
doing
case,
of it.
yeah,
Got it.
it's still the same outcome.
How long did it take until your brother decided to join?
It wasn't that much longer after. A few months, maybe.
Okay. Oh, that's not long at all.
No,
Okay.
no.
And how much older is he than you?
He's a year. He's
Okay.
got me by a year.
Okay.
So
That's pretty close.
at that age, we were doing everything together. You know
Right.
what I mean? I think he had more of a conscience as far as knowing that it wasn't the right thing to do, which is why he was so against it when the initial request was made. He's like, no, no, you're not.
Yeah.
So, but again, we did everything together, and you know, I don't know. I wouldn't say he did it because of me. I think it was just, this is who we're around all the time.
I think it was
You know,
probably easier for him to do it because of you.
quite possibly.
And I think that I don't know that we can never say because we can't go back and
Right.
rearrange history,
Right.
right? But I wonder what his journey would have been had you not gone first or even been there
Right.
to do it.
Right.
Or if you would have had the same mindset that he did. It's like, we
Right.
don't do that.
Right.
We don't know. Very, very interesting. So the initiation, then you're fighting amongst yourselves, and then sounds like some really great bonding,
Yeah.
right? Okay. Um, and also too, the other thought was, having your brother jump in as well just made it all the more strong for you.
Yeah.
Just kind of
Yeah.
brought it even that much more
Absolutely.
more home. It, and I'm not, Amy, you certainly can disclose what you choose to disclose, but were there things about it that you didn't like or didn't enjoy?
As things progressed as far as time, you start seeing a lot more.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So it's no longer that innocent side that you see as a kid watching from the outside.
Right.
You know what I mean? So there are things you see some of your closest friends get beat up for different reasons, or you start having the news come back, such and such was shot and this person got killed, or you start hearing that, and that it kind of sets in
Right.
the dangers of it. But at the same token, there's another part of you that's this is my family, so you want to go take care of whatever the situation is. So
Gotcha.
retaliation or something to that effect, you know. So it's there was a lot of things that we saw that we didn't like, but I think it was one of those, the good outweighs the bad.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? So it wasn't enough to really shake you to the point to where you just leave it alone and don't come back around or anything like that. You know, it was a part of what happens in their lifestyle. So
Do you think it's common that the good outweighs the bad?
I would, in my opinion, yes. My experiences, I've had very few fights in comparison to some who are a heck of a lot deeper in. And when I say deeper in, I mean in some cases you choose to get involved in certain things, like whether or not you sell drugs, carry guns, and all of that. Like there is a time in which you are expected to be down for your neighborhood, but it wasn't. Outside of those times, you chose whether or not you wanted to rob people or sell drugs and things like that. That was a personal choice, at least in my case. I can't speak for every faction or every area, because my area might be different than another area, even though they're the same gang, same affiliation.
Right.
But the person in that area calling the shots might have totally different expectations versus where we were. And I believe that we were, I keep referring to we, speaking of my brother and myself, but I believe we were around people who were a hell of a lot more compassionate to our youth.
Wow.
So their focus, we would have to bring report cards to session, to make sure we're doing what we're supposed to do in school. So I think there was a different level of compassion in the areas that we grew up in versus some other areas that you might hear about where 12-year-olds are killing people,
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think for me, the good outweighed the bad.
So I want to take a moment and pause. Thank everyone who's tuning in. You are listening to WVLP 103.1 FM, also live streaming at WVLP.org. For anybody just catching us in the moment, we are having a very, very interesting conversation. My guest is Talmadge Travis, very forthcoming,
Thank you.
and generous
Thank you.
with information. So if I haven't thanked you, thank you for that.
Very welcome.
We're having a conversation about his journey, his walk in life, and how he was affiliated with some gang activity in the city of Chicago.
Yeah.
And just a couple things he'd shared with me last night were absolutely shifting for me. And I wanted to know more. So here we are, getting a little bit deeper into the conversation and getting a lot more information about it. Again, anyone checking in, he was sharing that he had joined when he was 12. His brother joined a few months later. His brother about a year older.
Yeah.
And at this point, we've got you and your brother. Father still doesn't know, and
Right.
mother out of state doesn't know as well.
Right.
But I hear and heard a lot of community support for it. So how long were you in? Are you still in?
There was never really an official, hey, I'm done,
Okay.
anything like that. You just, and again, I'll speak for me, getting older. I got 3 kids. I'm not hanging on the blocks anymore or anything like that.
Right.
I do still have a lot of love for the faction. I still have tons of friends that I'm in constant communication with who were involved in the lifestyle. But you just, as you get older, you kind of back away. At least that's the case for me. I'm sure there's some people who are probably older than me that are still heavily involved. But just my journey, I was able to take a step back and focus on family, my children, my wife, versus to continue to be in the midst of everything, because that's where the higher risk is, So,
Like, do you mean to stay in?
yeah, well, staying constantly in the same area, around the same things that you were around as a kid, so drug dealing and all of that, I'm not around that.
Right.
And the risk, again, even if I'm not selling it, is many officers out there that's looking to get as many people in jail as they can. At one point, I know they had quotas. I believe they were told to stop now, but I'm not sure how that works. But I do know for sure, you could be the nicest kid. If you're still around, they can plant drugs on you or anything like that. So for me, it's not smart to stay out there every day knowing that I have a family to come back to.
Yeah, I was going to say the risk to your family is huge.
It's too great.
Yeah. Are you in communication with anybody that took the same path you did, as far as like kind of pulling back and creating their own life?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you still have people around you that were part of that conversation?
Absolutely.
That's kind of wonderful, actually.
It is. It was a family.
Yeah.
It's a family. I talk to people every day who was a part of the same lifestyle, but then now they have different responsibilities. They have different journeys in life that they've taken, and some are good, some are bad, some are barely hanging on, but nonetheless, it's all still a family.
That's interesting. Yeah. For those that are like me with very limited exposure to it, that's not what I thought that was a part of.
Right.
Yeah, that is what you're describing to me. It does sound like a family,
right?
A good one. So we've all got a few people in our clan that but yeah, it feels like there's a lot of good support there.
Yeah.
I do like that your faction was conscious in about the neighborhood.
Absolutely.
The people in the neighborhood supporting.
Yeah.
Did they do anything with any external or outside causes, or just kind of protecting their own?
from what I experienced, it was more so protecting their own. I wouldn't doubt there was some type of activities with different places like the Boys and Girls Club or something like that. I wouldn't doubt that.
Right.
It's just not what I was a part of. Like my interactions, I wasn't doing anything like that. The community service was in the community, you know.
Well, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, because who else is going to pick it up?
Right. Right.
The I guess one of the questions I have is if you could tell me like the top thing or the top couple of things that you got from that experience that you might not have gotten anywhere else.
Right. I wouldn't say I wouldn't have gotten it anywhere else. It just, I happened to get it there and I got it early, and that was the love of family like that. You fight and you are still family. You know, and you can experience that at home. I'm sure most people do. Even I did. My brother and I fought all the time. And, you know, it was just a reinforcement of that. You know, you stay family, like you're still family. And I think being in the faction, it reinforced the toughness. Like, don't let anybody walk over you. And, you know, you stand your ground, which sounds chaotic to an extent. It sounds like it breeds a bunch of fighting and stuff like that. But even transitioning that into the business world, you know, you be assertive. You make sure, you know what you're talking about and all of that. Like, it's no different. And that's why one of the interesting things is being multi-tiered from leadership and all of that stuff. Like, it is one of the best teachers for business for me. You know, you're dealing with, and I know this is going to sound crazy, especially to a lot of the listeners and viewers, but you're dealing with people who have come from nothing and have illegally, sold drugs and stuff like that, but they run businesses. You know, it's illegal, but it's a business.
Right.
And just as savvy as they are on the streets, if that transferred into the boardroom, they would be just as savvy and they would be great at business. It's just the path that they took is one of a different one than you might have taken or someone else. Even myself, when I pulled back, I am in a position of leadership at my job. And again, some of the same toughness and thick skin that you have to have out there is the same toughness and thick skin you have to have in the corporate setting. So,
do you have moments where you can connect the dots, where you say, I am this, and I am this man because of that experience?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. Just, just the go-getter spirit.
Yeah.
You know, like you see a lot of that in the streets. And again, if you apply that, I've been at a company for 14 years, and from the very bottom level, made it to the top.
Yeah.
So, and it's that, that go-getter that you learn from being out there. It's just, just apply it.
Why do you have to be a go-getter when you're on the streets in the gang?
You get swallowed.
Oh.
You know what I mean? Like, when I say go-getter, that term, I'm kind of using it loosely, but it's a matter of being able to survive whatever the situation is, whether it's fights, whether it's figuring out, like it could be internal fighting, that happens too. It's a family. So that happens.
Yeah.
So from the internal fighting to the external fighting different factions and all of that, like you have to be able to survive. You know what I mean? So if you are the weak kid out there, yeah, some people will help you fight your battles, but how long does that last? until you have to start fighting for yourself.
Well,
You know?
I would guess that they encourage you to step up.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, and not have to be protected
Absolutely.
for long periods of time. Do you know any kids right now that are affiliated?
Um, Not as young as 12, no, but I do know some young people who are affiliated, you know. And you, the best thing being a person that was involved, and to where I am now, the best thing you can do is try to sympathize with them, and use your words to see if you can help direct their journey. You know, like there's not one person that I can ever recall who, because their mom said, "Hey, you better not do it," they didn't do it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right, I'm
So
sure
they're
not.
gonna make that choice.
Yeah.
If anyone's listening that is in that position, obviously I would say don't do it. I think it's a rabbit hole, and if you're not careful, you know, you can get sucked in pretty fast, pretty deep.
And never
So
be able to crawl out.
yeah, so I would suggest not doing it,
Yeah.
but it's also a choice that I understand. It's a choice that I've made at one point myself. So being on the two different sides, you know, you just try and use your journey to help somebody else. Use your journey, your struggles, the way you got out or whatever, you know, you use that to help other people. You know,
Well, that's what we're supposed to do.
that's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Takes takes a lot of courage and a lot of strength to be that person. And
Absolutely.
to step up into that without question. Interesting that you're saying that because, just in the chat we're having it, I'm not feeling that you have a sense of regret about it, that you are sorry that you walked that walk.
Right. The regret I have is from the role model standpoint. So I would have never wanted to tell my son that the same person who's telling him not to be in a gang and, you know, go to school, get straight A's, get a great job, become an entrepreneur, all of that. The same person is telling him that is the same person who's also at one point had to have conversations about him being in the gang and stuff like that. So the regret is that, but from lessons learned to friends made, family made, things like that, I wouldn't say that there's a regret.
And for anybody listening, and I'm sure that they're probably maybe are having the same feeling that I have, but it's almost like there's like two different plates spinning, two different conversations about it, you know. And I know, for me personally, I don't look at things as failures. I don't believe there are failures or mistakes. Everything is an opportunity to learn.
Yes.
Absolutely everything.
Yes.
So you probably have that same or
Absolutely.
comparable way of approaching life.
Absolutely.
Which is how we've got the two plates spinning.
Yeah.
You know, that you don't have regrets about it, but you wouldn't want your own going in,
Absolutely not.
and you would encourage somebody not to join,
Right.
not to do those sort of things.
Right. My journey is different than everyone else. Everyone has their own journey.
Yeah.
And the fear is you see it being glorified and all of this good stuff, and I hope I'm not glorifying it.
I don't think so. Yeah.
But your journey may not end up like mine. There's a lot of people who I was around whose journey ended up in the grave
Yeah.
or wheelchairs or, you know what I mean? Like
Prison.
The journey for each person is different. I was fortunate. It's not a lot of that, you know.
What percentage of people do you think are the ones that come out of it with the good?
That's tough. That's tough. It's everywhere now. Like, I mean, it's always been like that, but I believe I was reading, it was something online, and I believe there's like over 5,000 gangs in Chicago.
No, stop.
Yeah.
Now, you're not talking about gang members. You're talking about
No,
gangs.
gangs. Like this faction might have a spinoff of it, and you know, like Yeah.
There aren't that many religions.
I'd be interested to look that up.
Yeah, that would.
But
Yeah.
I'm almost positive what I read was that there's close to 5,000 gang factions in Chicago.
So the first thing that comes to mind is, how do they keep that straight? Like, aren't you just starting to get confused? And how do you distinguish yourself? There aren't that many colors, piercings,
Right.
leg legs up, or all that kind of thing. How do you keep?
It's very interesting. That's part of that rabbit hole. You know what I mean? It's a part of that rabbit hole. Like I feel like, and I could be wrong, but I feel like in the early 90s, the things that I experienced are totally different than what I see today.
How so?
What I see today is a lot of the spinoffs, and I don't see a lot of structure.
Oh, okay.
So without that structure, to me, it's all the more dangerous.
Well, that like when you say structure, that
The leadership in place.
and the checks and balances within the
Yeah.
organization. Yeah, got it.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of scary.
Yeah.
So who's policing them if they're not self-policing?
It's a great question.
Wow.
And again, I'm removed far enough to where I don't have that answer.
Yeah.
And my focus is totally changed to wanting to help whatever situation I can, to decrease the amount of violence that's going on.
Right.
Versus back then, it was fighting. Hey, let's do it.
Right.
So my focus is totally different now, and I fear for a lot of my family who might have to take that same journey or make that same decision, because again, my view of things now versus in the early 90s, 2000, it's totally different. I don't see the structure,
Yeah.
So
I think that's scary no matter what the conversation is.
yeah.
There has to be some level of structure.
And I'm sure there's a level of structure that is helping them police their own and
Yeah.
all of that good stuff. But just for me, my experience versus what I'm seeing, to me, it seems a bit different.
Why do you think so many spin-offs have happened?
I don't think some people like structure. Being told what to do in some cases, that has always been a cause of division for anybody. If you are this headstrong person at work and your boss is telling you things that you don't want to hear, you either quit or, you go find another job or get into it with your boss or anything like that. You know what I mean? So
Right.
I think it's just the mindset of whether or not you are willing to fall in line with that structure.
Well, and I gotta think that there's as many, I want to say it's an alpha male thing, as many alpha males in the early 90s and beforehand that there are now.
I agree.
I wonder, that it's a curiosity to me. It's like, why is everybody spinning off?
Right.
And because what it leads me to think, and I could be wrong, and we don't know, unless we were talking to somebody who's currently affiliated, is
Right.
that it almost makes me think that perhaps that sense of family that you experienced, which was a good component to your experience of it, is not quite as present now as it was back then.
Quite possible.
So if you don't have all that feel good,
Right. Right.
then what's the point of taking somebody else's direction?
Absolutely.
Especially like when you say when you're disagreeing with them and you think you know it better.
Right.
You have a different way of
Right.
getting at it. So I'm wondering if they've lost some of that.
It's quite possible.
Yeah.
It's a question that I don't know if we'll ever find the answer to.
We're not going to figure that out today, are we?
Right. No.
Well, it's always interesting to think about things, and the kind of one of the things that I wanted to ask you too is, last night when I had the privilege to meet you, and
Thank you.
and to talk with you on this topic, I think what my sense is that as in all things, there's lots of layers of misunderstanding.
Absolutely.
And I just in the little pieces that I got and the shifting that I got, my question would be, is there something, a thing or two or a thing that you would want people to know from the outside looking in to that?
I think the biggest thing is seek the understanding for what's going on. Like everyone can acknowledge a problem, but if you don't understand the problem or the root cause of this problem, then the solution is way too far off for us to even grab. So I think if anyone out there is, whoever's listening, understand the problem. So some of the things is the behavior of police in our neighborhood. Some of the things is not being, the communities are not funded properly. There's not a lot of opportunities that people see. There are some people who create opportunities, but there's a great majority of people in neighborhoods like I grew up in who the opportunity is a lot easier being affiliated than not. From the love that you might be missing at home, from the lack of family support, to being bullied, so you're looking for that protection. There's a whole lot that goes into making that decision.
Gotcha.
There's a lot. And again, if you were to stay in the community, the opportunities that most people who don't live in those communities see or presume we have, we don't see it that way. We don't see it that way.
Gotcha.
So,
Gotcha.
yeah. So I would say just understand, try to understand it, as opposed to the instant label of they're savages and everything else. These are humans who care enough to clean up the community, who care enough to help the elderly people with whether it's medicine or taking their groceries in or helping them pay rent, things like that. These are the same people that are labeled savages, So there's a lot of compassion involved. It's just their system,
Right.
It's just their system. So try to understand it and help to provide the resources to cause people to make a different decision. So one of the great things that I'm experiencing now is a person who I just met yesterday who cares enough to want to hear the story. Like those are the type of things that has to happen. You care enough.
Start.
It's a great start. When you
Start.
care enough to want to hear the story,
Hear the story and share the story.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's not just my bubble.
Right. Right.
And thank you for that.
Very welcome.
Thank you for that. It feels to me that if people took a moment to pause and can get present to the fact that there is compassion within those systems,
Absolutely.
and to have the same compassion for the systems and for the people involved.
Absolutely.
So I never thought of people in gangs as savages. I always honestly thought that they might be a little broken.
Yeah.
So my heart is already probably in a compassionate place.
Absolutely.
But I think, is probably in many things in society, we just tend to go, we're not going to look at that.
Yeah.
We're, like you said, we're going to label it. We're going to chastise it. We're going to punish it.
Right.
right?
Right.
And we're going to do everything we can to squash it,
Right.
as opposed to what you're saying. If I'm hearing correctly, that if we approach this whole conversation with a level of compassion, then from that, I think automatically comes, how can we help provide
Absolutely.
a different opportunity that maybe somebody isn't seeing? It might be
Absolutely.
there, but how do we get that a little bit stronger,
Absolutely.
louder, get the flame going underneath it? It's fabulous.
And I think one of the things that another issue that gets overlooked a lot of times is the damage that I say these people, I'm one of them, but the damage that people in these communities suffer. I mean, it's very rare that anyone thinks to use the term mental illness or to use, like there's people who are legit suffering from PTSD,
For sure. Yeah.
and it's not really talked about. The effect of having your friend shot in front of you, or, the effect of getting beat or whatever. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of traumatic things that happened, even just from the broken home standpoint, that causes that outburst of behavior. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of things that happen that strikes people in these communities mentally. It's not always just the physical, somebody got beat up or anything like that. Like the effects on them mentally should be looked at as well.
Well, believe it or not, we're actually coming up on an hour. Is this something?
Wow.
I know. I promised you this was going to go. And you'd be like, are we done yet?
Right.
Yeah. Is this something that you would be generous enough to have another conversation, and we can
Absolutely.
take it into that level in other places as well? Not that we want to,
Absolutely.
I don't want to restrict everything that you have to offer,
Right.
but I'd love to look at that.
Absolutely.
I'd love to look at that. That opens up so much more to, if you add what Talmadge is sharing about those stresses on top of the day-to-day stresses
Right.
that we're all dealing with.
Right. Right.
We're all under stress, and then you add those, throw
Yeah.
those into the pot. My goodness.
Yeah.
And how then that probably affects the whole conversation.
Yeah.
I'd be fascinated
Absolutely.
to take that one step further. So we'll definitely pick it up in a new show. I want to thank everybody who's been listening. You've been tuned in to WVLP at 103.1 FM, also live streaming at WVLP.org. I want to thank our show's underwriter, Ryan Eberhardt with Diamond Residential Mortgage. Ryan's exceptional. He's got a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience, and without question, his heart is in the right place. His office is conveniently located on Route 30 at 350 Northland Drive in Valparaiso. His direct phone line is area code 219-707-8429. You've been listening to Terry Healy, bringing you some extraordinary transformation. I want to thank our guest today, Mr. Talmadge Travis.
Thank you.
Get used to his voice. I'm going to kind of put a little thought out there for everybody. You may actually be hearing him again, and it might be on the other side of the microphone. So I don't think we're going to be done with interviewing and maybe listening to him interview.
Absolutely.
Future. So keep your ears open. I've enjoyed him, and I'm sure you have as well. Thanks everyone that's been listening, and thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.